So, how do you actually keep a social space safe without turning into the morality police? It's a massive challenge, especially when you're talking about relationships. Today, we're going to dive into a pretty brilliant framework for doing just that. Let's get into it. And this right here is the core idea. I love this. It's not about judging people or their choices. It's about having a neutral, systematic process to scan for risky behaviors. Just like airport security scans for threats, not for what you packed for your vacation. And here's the fundamental problem, right? Social platforms, they want to create connection, that's their whole purpose, but they also have a huge responsibility to prevent harm. So where do they draw that line without policing what's right or wrong? Well, the answer is having a clear, actionable system. Okay, first up, let's look at the goal. A super simple 3-tier system for categorizing behavior.
It all boils down to these 3 categories. You've got green for your healthy, totally low-risk users. Then you have yellow for those who are kinda drifting, maybe towards secrecy, maybe crossing a few boundaries. And then you have red, which is for clear, high-risk behavior. The whole point is to figure out which tier a user falls into so the platform knows exactly how to respond.
So next, let's dig into what these 3 risk tiers, green, yellow, and red, actually look like in the real world.
What's so smart about this is how clear the progression is. Green is all about transparency. My spouse knows everything's out in the open. But then you get to the yellow tier, and things get murky. Privacy starts to be used as a shield, and flirting gets passed off as just a joke. By the time someone's in the red, it's about active deception. It's this really clear ladder from transparency straight to manipulation, and this table shows you exactly what to look for.
So what does a platform do about it? Well, the response is totally proportional to the risk. For someone in the yellow tier, it's more of a gentle nudge. Education, maybe some reminders. But for red, nope, it gets firm and fast. We're talking warnings, suspensions, and a full-on review. The key here is that the action always fits the behavior. Okay, so how does this whole audit actually work? Well, it's all about a scoring system. This is where the framework gets really practical. This isn't about gut feelings or assumptions. It's literally a checklist that turns behavior patterns into a concrete, measurable score. And check this out. This shows you exactly how it works. You just go through these categories, things like transparency and accountability, and you score each behavior from 0 to 2. So for example, if a spouse knows and is totally comfortable with it, that's a 0. But if they have absolutely no idea, that's a 2. You just add up the points, simple as that.
So you add it all up. Let's say, for example, a user scores an 11 out of a possible 14.
And bam, that score gives you a super clear result. Anything 8 or above automatically lands a user in the red tier, and that triggers an enforcement action. There's no ambiguity. The system just converts those fuzzy patterns into a very clear decision. But it's not just about watching what people do. Platforms can also just ask some direct questions. And wow, that last one is so powerful. Would you be okay if your spouse used the app the same way you do? If the answer's no, that just screams double standard. And that's a major red flag. It's a fantastic test for reciprocity and, hidden intent. But here's the thing, auditing is all reactive, right? It's after the fact. The real goal, the real game changer, is to build healthier platforms from the ground up with what are called systemic guardrails. And this is such a cool product design idea. It's not about banning late-night chats or anything like that. It's about adding a tiny barrier, just a moment of friction that makes a user pause and think before doing something risky when, let's be honest, their judgment might be a little lower. Here's a perfect example of what that looks like. This little pop-up, it doesn't actually stop anyone from making the call, but it forces a split second of reflection. It's a gentle guardrail, not a locked gate, and it just nudges people toward being a little more intentional. And this is huge. Empowering the community itself is absolutely key. Those vague report user buttons? They're basically useless. Giving users specific options, like unwanted flirting or pressure to move off platform, gives the platform real, actionable data to spot patterns and protect other people. All right, finally, let's pull all of this together and look at a quick case study to see why this framework matters so much. So here's our guy. He's married, but his wife isn't on the app. His stated motive is to meet people and explore cultures, and he seems to handle unwanted flirting pretty well in public. But notice what's missing. We have no idea if his wife even knows he's on the app, and we have zero visibility into what's happening in his private messages. Okay, so based on what we know, and more importantly, what we don't know, Where would you place him? What's your call? Green, yellow, or red?
The verdict is yellow. And this is so important to understand. He's not in the red tier because he isn't doing anything explicitly wrong that we can see, but he's definitely not green because of all those unknowns. That lack of spousal awareness and his purely social motives create a real potential for boundary drift. So the right action isn't to ban him, it's to monitor.
And that brings us right back to where we started, to that core idea. This system isn't about making moral judgments. It's about recognizing a pattern of risk to keep the community safe and respectful for absolutely everyone. So, I'll leave you with this thought. Think about the apps and platforms you use every day. Do they have these kinds of thoughtful guardrails in place, or do they kind of just leave you to fend for yourself? It's a question worth asking because really, building healthier online spaces is a responsibility that we all share.